Brought to you by JMR Rentals, professional digital cinema and broadcast equipment rentals in Brooklyn, New York. JMRNY.com. And now get 15% off your first rental when you use the promo code WEEKEND. Call 347-721-3400 or email info@jmrny.com for details. Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend, where we go behind the scenes and talk to the creators of independent entertainment. I'm Jason Godbey, and joining me via Zoom today, he is an accomplished creator in the world of animation and the man behind Augenblick Studios, Mr. Aaron Augenblick. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you, Jason. I'm excited to be here, and I love talking about movies, and I can talk about my own movies, and I'm just excited to see the Brooklyn Bridge behind you. It makes me feel at home because I ride my bicycle literally across that bridge every day to go to work in Dumbo, where we've had the studio for the past a little over 20 years now. So it's great to be here. Thank you.
Very cool. We love local folks. You know, we're in Brooklyn
Yeah.
as well. Normally we tape out of the Brick Media Arts Center, but I haven't been able to do that since COVID last year, so I'm doing this out of my house. And people have been kind to like excuse the traffic noise because I've got Brooklyn 6 inches away from my window.
Yeah.
But we had a lot to talk about, so I want to get right into it. We learned about you through the Brooklyn Film Festival. Your show Death Hacks was screening there. William Hammond gave it a great review for us. And I want to talk a bit about that. You also got some new projects coming up. But before we get into all that, I want to talk to you about you. And how did you get into showbiz? What's your origin story?
I love thinking that I'm actually in showbiz. That's exciting because I'm an animator, and we're usually, the bottom level of the entertainment industry. So I appreciate that. How did I get into showbiz? I mean, basically, I grew up in Delaware, and I just always drew cartoons. I've always loved comic books and animated movies and animated TV shows. And I literally, people ask like, oh, when did you get into animation? Like, I literally can't remember a time when I didn't consider myself a cartoonist, from birth, I think. I was always enjoying cartoons. And so I was, a kid making comic books. I was making crude animations in my house when I wasn't, throwing myself off of the roof or lighting things on fire. I would, do early claymation, and sometimes, a little bit, I would take like a video camera and like push the button really fast so I could like draw and then make animation. So I was doing crude animations really early on, and always just knew I wanted to do animation, and went to School of Visual Arts in Manhattan. And that was the point in the late 90s when I moved to New York, and I've lived here ever since. And I went to SVA, had a great time there. And shortly after going to SVA, I worked for MTV for a little while. I worked on a couple shows. I worked on a show called Daria that people like. And I worked on a show called Downtown and a couple other things. And, when I was at MTV, I kind of always, maybe it's because I went to SVA, maybe it's because of the types of movies I tend to watch. I've always had the indie spirit. I always knew, and I think it was cemented working for a giant corporation like Viacom, that I didn't want to work in a corporation, in a giant corporation, right? So pretty early on, I was like, I think I'd like to maybe do this in a smaller way, a more independent way. So when I was at MTV, I kind of convinced them to let me bop around the studio and, do every piece of the puzzle for me. I was doing design, I was doing layout, I was doing animation, I ended up getting to direct a little bit. So I really wanted to see how a studio operates. How does the baton get passed during an animation production? So after a couple of years, I felt pretty confident that like I could really make animation in what I would think in like more of a personal way, right? So I left MTV. So I only really worked for anyone else for about 2 years. And I started my studio in Dumbo in 1999. And I've been there ever since. I've run an independent studio since 1999. And I moved to Brooklyn. I was a Manhattan kid because I was SVA. You know, I lived in Harlem. I lived in Lower East Side. I didn't know anything about Brooklyn. And I went to Brooklyn because it was cheap. And it was the late 90s and no one would go there. And it was cheap and artists were living there. And I opened my studio then, and I've been there ever since. And I'm really happy to have run an independent animation studio and made the kind of cartoons that I want to make for a little over 20 years.
I saw some of Death Hacks and really cool, unusual animation. And it looks like I think Bill said that you guys did it for Snapchat.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So give us like a bit about give me like the log line, like the Hollywood log line.
Well, basically, like I said, I've been doing this. I've owned and run an indie studio for 20 years now, and I started to get a little bit of like a midlife crisis around the 20-year point where I was saying, like, what do I want to be doing with my studio? What have I done that I haven't gotten to do before? And there's been a couple of things, that we started doing. One was doing a lot more development than ever before. I mean, I've developed a little bit here and there. I've definitely created a lot of indie films and a lot of things that were things that I wrote or created. But I haven't really done it as much as I enjoy doing it. And another thing I did that we can or don't have to go into is I started a kids animation studio, because the majority of everything we've ever done at our studio has been for adults, which is great. But I really wanted to crack into doing kids stuff too. So I started developing things for both the adult and the kid space. So one of the things that I, had an idea for was, it really was as simple as, the name Death Hacks. Like I as much as I love, everything, vintage animation, and I love classic animation, and my biggest influences are Fleischer and, Ub Iwerks and early Warner Brothers and Winsor McKay. Like, these are all my favorite animation ever made. I also have a great love for pop culture and I love new stuff, right? So I kind of had this idea, which was as simple as like life hacks for dead people, right? Because another great love of mine is horror. I love horror films. It's probably my favorite thing to watch, more than even animation or comedy. I watch more horror than I watch anything else. So to me, I suddenly had this idea that, like, oh, it'd be really funny if you could do a YouTube channel, an influencer channel, which was life hacks by and for dead people, right? As if you were seeing a dispatch from the other world, where you were seeing dead people telling other newly dead people how to hack their afterlife, right? And doing it in a very young, modern, social media type of way, right? And I thought that would be really funny. And, one of my biggest influences, probably as far as movies go in my life, was Beetlejuice. Was a big deal for me as a kid, seeing a movie like that in the theater when I was a little kid. I mean, it blew my mind. And the handbook for the recently deceased, I think it is, in Beetlejuice, was always something I just thought was so funny. So it was kind of my attempt at dipping into that world, doing comedy, pop culture satire, and horror, which are three of my favorite things all wrapped up in one. So that maybe that's the world's longest log line I just gave you. So I apologize.
The show was on Snapchat. What do you, and now you're doing the festival circuit with it. What are kind of the plans going forward?
So what happened was, I had this idea, pitched it around, and, it got some interest a few places, but, I talked to Snapchat and they were very interesting to me because, there's a lot of people at Snapchat that are like indie film people, like a lot of, Aaron Keating, she's from IFC, and she went to work for Snapchat because they want to do really interesting programming. So it was really, I went over there and I'd known Aaron because I developed a show with her years ago for IFC. And she was like, look, we're trying to break all boundaries here. You know what I mean? There's really no rules with Snapchat other than we want to make things that you couldn't really watch in other places, right? So, she was like, this is a show that's meant to be watched on a phone, the shows that we're creating. And we want to try to really lean into, like, what are the things that we can do when you're watching something on a phone that people can't do if you're watching something in the theater or on TV. So we really leaned into it. So they bought the show. We made these episodes with them, and they were always really encouraging about, you know, trying to make it as funny and as, you know, outsider and groundbreaking as we could possibly make it. So we made them for Snapchat, and which was great. And, you know, there was a lot of Snapchat people that just loved the show, and it was one of the more successful animated shows they ever did. That being said, the Venn diagram between, you know, my fans, the fans of Augenblick Studios that know our work from Adult Swim and Comedy Central and places like that, and, you know, the Venn diagram with Snapchat fans isn't a big overlap, right? So a lot of the people that were fans of Augenblick Studios were like, I don't have Snapchat. I haven't seen the show. I don't really know anything about it. So I had this idea, you know, which was, well, what I could do is I would love the idea of like taking the work we did for Snapchat and adapting it and reworking it and re-editing it into like basically like a really like a supercut, I call it, like where you basically take the best things we did and put it into like a 30-minute movie and hit the festival circuit with that. It's something I've done in the past before. I did a thing called Golden Age that was in Sundance, and it won the grand prize at Ottawa. And that was something I actually created little shorts for Comedy Central. And I reworked it, adapted it, put it into a movie. So it's kind of an interesting way to sort of filter corporate dollars into like an indie vision. You know what I mean? So it's a little bit of a swindle, but I made this movie and I made it in a 30-minute animated short. And now it's getting this, like, no pun intended, second life, where we're seeing it in theaters now, which is really exciting. And, you know, getting virtual festivals and things like that. So we've been making the rounds that way. So I just love it. I love what we did. I'm excited about it. I think it's really funny and really interesting and a little bit new. And I'm just excited about it, you know, reaching audiences in any way I can. And festivals is such an exciting way to do it.
That's really cool. I mean, it's kind of cool, a Snapchat, that they didn't say, oh, this is, you know, proprietary, making it for us. You can't release it anywhere. I mean, you know, a lot of people aren't aware that the hoops that you have to jump through to basically keep your own IP, you know, if someone else has paid for it, especially.
Be different if festivals made me any money. It doesn't make me any money.
I see.
It only costs me money to put it in festivals. So I think it'd be different if I was making money doing any of this. But honestly, it's just for the love of the cartoon and love of festivals, honestly.
Is there any plan to maybe, you know, take it to a place like Adult Swim or take it to another network?
Who knows? Who knows? I mean, I know people really enjoyed it and people have said a lot of great things about it. Will it go on and on? I don't know. We'll see. If people are interested in seeing more, then we'll make more.
So I wanted to ask you, because we've had a lot of indie filmmakers on this show. We've had a lot of people do the festival circuit, but we haven't had a lot of animators and people in the world of animation. And I know people are interested in that. And I was just trying to think, because I think animation is like, there's like sort of show business, there's like feature filmmaking and television, and then there's like animation, and then they separate like adult animation from children's animation, which I've talked to animators and people have like a bone to pick with that phrase about, because like animation isn't a genre, it's an art form. For anyone who is interested in getting into that field, now of course it's probably going to be different than the way you did, because the world is different now. When you look at the landscape now, is there any advice you could give people looking to kind of either become animators or direct animation?
I think one of the most exciting things, you know, when I talk to schools, you know, when I was going to school, it was difficult to make a movie, and it was equally difficult to get people to see it, right? And so, you know, it's like, you know, I literally, I think I was the last class of SVA that had to finish on film, you know, like actual 35mm film, where we were like sitting there on a steam deck and cutting and splicing and doing all that. And then, you know, to put it in festivals, it's like you were putting a whole package together and sending it out, and you had to send prints out. And I mean, you know, that whole world. So it was heavy. It was a lot of work, right? If I felt like it, I could probably stay up late tonight and make an animated film, and the entire world could see it in the morning. Right? So if I felt like it, right? So what's available now to any young filmmakers is the fact that it's quite easy to make animation. I mean, it's time consuming. Animation's it's an arduous task. But as far as the idea of like, having the tools to do it, you're not painting cells. You're not putting it on an Oxbury camera. You're not getting it developed, right? You could literally scribble a thing on freeware and upload it to Instagram, and the world will see it, right? So the fact that you can basically make all the animations you want. You want to make your own series, the autobiography of your life, do it. You can do it right now, right? So the only question is it any good? Right? And if it's good, people will check it out, So I think that it's a really exciting time now, because I encourage everyone, if you have a vision, if you have a style, if you have an idea of what you see animation being, well, make it. Make it, put it on Instagram, put it on Twitter, put it on Twitch, put it wherever you want to put it. But do it and make it the way you want to make it, because you can do that. You can have autonomy on your vision now in a way that we just couldn't even do before, because it cost too much money and there was too many hurdles in front of you. So I tell everyone, if you have a vision, just make it. Go off and make it. And, don't worry about people saying, like, oh, should I be pitching the networks? And how do I create? It's like, you can go that route, but you're probably better off just making it, and then they'll come to you. You know what I mean? Because, networks, they're looking for the new thing. So they'll knock on your door if you make something good that people are excited about. If you get a lot of followers based on the animation you're making, trust me, Adult Swim will find you. You know what I mean?
Did you see an uptick in animation since the pandemic?
I would say it's beyond an uptick. I would call it an explosion, because honestly, our studio has never been busier. We right now have 4 series in production at the same time. In addition to, we're developing a lot of original properties that we've sold. Like I said, I started this kids company where I have a new series that I created personally for PBS that I'm working on right now. We're doing a new commercial campaign for a very famous cereal company. So there's just a ton of things. We have a new Adult Swim show coming out. We have a new HBO Max show coming out. We have a new TBS show coming out. So we have tons. It's just because of the fact that, the reality is it's very difficult to shoot live action right now. It has been for the past year. It's still a little easier now, but it's still very difficult. And animation has not skipped a beat. We transferred from working in-house in our entire team, working in Dumbo, to working virtually overnight. And that's what we've been doing for the past year. So as far as process goes, we're creating more animation than we ever had. It just ever have, but it just so happens that most of our staff is all virtual.
You mentioned some new shows, and I wanted to talk to you about that. I saw on IMDb that you guys had listed a new show called Adventures of Drunky.
Right. Yeah,
which
that's actually a feature.
That's a feature film.
That's a feature film. Now that's a feature film. You want to talk about indie? That's a feature film we've been doing independently for almost, I think, a little over 3 years now. So that's something where I didn't want to take any corporate money at all. It's completely independently funded. It's the feature film that I've always wanted to see. I've always wanted to make. It stars Sam Rockwell as a character called Drunky. It's a love letter to Fleischer Studios and New York City and old weird America. And it's a really incredible movie that we've been working on for, like I said, 3 years. And it's one of those things where it's independently funded. So you work on it a lot, you stop working on it. You work on it a lot, you stop working on it. So we're still working on it. We have a really great rough cut. We still need to finish animation. So I'm hoping that's something I really want to get done by 2021 for sure.
And then you said that you've got different shows. You've got something. What do you have currently running? If people want to watch your stuff, where can they find it right now?
So we have a lot on Adult Swim. So HBO Max is a great place to go if you want to see Augenblick Studios shows. You can see our show. One of our more recent shows was The Jellies that we created with Tyler the Creator. You can also see Super Jail on there. You can still, I think, on Paramount Plus, you can see Ugly Americans, and also we did a Zoolander feature film, an animated Zoolander feature film that you can see on Paramount Plus. And then like honestly, there's and our most recent series was a show called Headspace on Netflix, which is an adaptation of the app, the meditation app, which was really excited to be a part of. And so we actually did that entire series during quarantine, and that's there's 2 seasons of that on Netflix. So those are all shows that you can watch right now. But to be honest, the most exciting things I'm doing are the things I'm doing this second, which you haven't seen yet. I can say we have a new show called Teenage Euthanasia, which is coming out on Adult Swim by the end of the year. And that's very, very exciting. And I have a new series for PBS, which is a kid show that I created that I can't say what it is yet, but I'm really excited about it. And a couple other networks are going to be showing our stuff within the year as well that I can't really say too much about just yet.
Yeah, we always have that problem on this
Yeah.
show when people have stuff, they have stuff in development or they have stuff that's not out yet. But
Yeah.
definitely, like when the feature film comes out, come back when you guys are hitting the
can't
festival circle for that. When you have new shows out, I'd love to talk to you about that. And you know, it's great having someone like you so accomplished on the show. For people who want to know more
Yeah.
about your studio, maybe work with you, maybe hire you to
Yeah.
make something, where can they find you guys on the web?
A good hub is augenblickstudios.com because, you know, in addition to, like our show reel, we have clips of everything we've ever made. In addition to, it's a portal to our Instagram page, our Twitter, our Facebook, all that. So that's definitely a good place to look, augenblickstudios.com. I'd say on social media, we're the most active on Instagram, and that's just Augenblick Studios, Augenblick Studios. And yeah, I think those places are a good place to look, and that's where we like to talk about the animation we're doing in post stuff.
And that's all we have time for today. Thanks so much for taking this trip down the rabbit hole. For more of our content, including our movie reviews, visit our website, norestfortheweekendpodcast.com. Don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Once again, I'd like to thank my guest, Aaron Augenblick, and our sponsor, JMR Rentals. For Behind the Rabbit Productions, I'm Jason Godbey. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.